From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, good Sunday morning. Welcome in. Faith is on assignment this week. Now, we are less than 4 months away from the 2026 primary election here in Georgia, where voters will decide nominees for governor, U.S. Senate, and many other races. It's only 114 days away, if you're counting. This past week, we saw a lot of early campaign activity. In the race for governor, Democrat Jason Estevez hosted his election year kickoff event in Atlanta's West End. Estevez is a former state senator and was once chair of the Atlanta School Board. He's in a crowded Democratic primary field that includes 9 other candidates who have filed to run for governor. Estevez says his experience on the state and local level will help him deliver results.
What Georgians are looking for is a leader that can cut through the chaos and destruction that's coming out of Washington, D.C., fight back against Trump, but also deliver on the issues that matter the most. And that's health, wealth, and opportunity, which is why I'm crisscrossing the state, delivering a message that Georgians can vote for something instead of always voting against something.
On the Republican side, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr made 2 stops in Cobb County this week. Thursday night, he visited with the Atlanta Young Republicans group at the Battery. He also stopped by the Cobb County Republican Women's Club on Friday. Carr is one of 3 prominent Republicans vying for the nomination.
I proudly have been a conservative, worked for Johnny Isakson, worked for Nathan Deal, been the Attorney General now for 10 years, focused on keeping people safe, focusing on bringing jobs to this state. You can look at my conservative record. It's not something I'm going to talk about. It's something that I've done.
Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, he is also in the GOP field, and Wednesday he spoke at a Gwinnett County Chamber of Commerce event where he emphasized a word that is becoming a theme of this midterm election year.
Everybody talks about affordability being the buzzword this year. Well, that's something we've been, cost of living is something we've been working on every year, that I've been lieutenant governor. Every year while I've been lieutenant governor, we've lowered the state income tax, and we're going to do it again this year. I'd like to see it get to 0.
Carr and Jones joined Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger as 3 statewide office holders vying for the Republican nomination for governor. Now, Raffensperger and Jones, they are from the same political party, but they had very different stances in the wake of the contentious 2020 election here in Georgia. Jones is among a group of conservative lawmakers who questioned the validity of Joe Biden's victory. Raffensperger gained national attention for his defense of the results in the face of claims that voter fraud was the reason for President Trump's defeat, claims that multiple court cases failed to substantiate. Jones presides over the state Senate, and Thursday its ethics committee held a hearing on a resolution accusing Raffensperger of failing to comply with a Department of Justice request for voter data. Jones issued a statement last week calling on Raffensperger to attend, but the Secretary of State was not there, drawing criticism from Republican State Senator Randy Robertson.
I have no personal gripe with the Secretary of State. He continuously fails to show up and answer the questions. And that is the absolute truth. And members that have sat on this committee have witnessed it more than once.
Raffensperger has pushed back against the accusations against him, saying his office has already given the DOJ all the data it is allowed to give under state law. On Friday, a Macon federal judge dismissed the suit for lack of jurisdiction. And in a Wednesday letter sent to the Ethics Committee chairman, the Secretary of State's office's lawyers said, quote, "If you and your colleagues wish to weaken the legal protections for Georgia voters' private information and make millions of Georgians vulnerable to identity theft, you can certainly change the law, but that is not something that the Secretary of State's office would support." The committee, controlled by Republicans, passed its resolution this week, but since it is a resolution, not a bill, it does not have the force of law. Now, zooming out to the entire country, there are also questions about how campaign finance laws are enforced and how new AI technology and record spending fit into the rules. Faith Jesse recently talked with the chair of the Federal Election Commission. This part of their conversation involves what will likely be a much discussed topic this election year, spending.
What are campaigns allowed to do? What are they not allowed to do? And is there a gray area there that you all are seeing?
Oh, there's definitely a gray area, and that's one of the things that I worry about now when we have a commission that doesn't have a quorum. Your campaigns are allowed to collect funds from their candidates and the committees at a certain amount, but super PACs are allowed to collect an unlimited amount, and that's one of the things that plays a factor in how much money we have in elections nowadays. Campaigns are required to report that information to us. In fact, we have a very big reporting date that's coming up on January 31st, so I invite everybody to pay attention at the website, because then you're going to see what's really happening in the money. They are allowed to make communications and ads, and they are required to, in some instances, they always have to report those communications to us, but they have to include disclaimers on that so the individual can know who is responsible and behind those ads. I wanted to give you a little bit, because I know I'm talking to the viewers of Georgia, so I wanted to give you guys a heads up, because as you lead into some very big elections that you just mentioned, you have a Senate election, you also have a special election for one of your congressional districts that is departed by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. You are looking at a lot of money that's coming your way. And for example, the senator has raised $54 million to date. That's approximately 15% of the total amount of money that Senate candidates have raised. And while he's raised a lot, he's also spent a lot as well. He spent $37 million. And as I said before at the start of this, we're in January. We've got a long way to go before we get to November.
A long way to go before we get to November, but it's going to get here very quickly. What's going to get here even sooner is our political roundtable. Joining us today, we have Mark Rountree. He's a Republican strategist and pollster. He's also the founder of Landmark Communications and a veteran of Georgia campaigns and elections. Also with us today, Democratic strategist Fred Hicks. He's the founder and president of the Hicks Evaluation Group, which has worked with hundreds of political campaigns for nearly 2 decades. And also with us today, Chauncey Alcorn, state and local politics reporter at Capital B Atlanta, all returning veterans of the Georgia Vote panel. We say it every week because it's always true. We got a lot to talk about in Georgia politics this week. Mark, let's start with you. There have been some fundraising announcements trickling out from some Senate campaigns. As you look at the field as it's shaping up going into the election year that we're now in, what's standing out to you?
A lot of the candidates are raising just a little bit more than they're spending, and that's a problem. I don't think the Republican candidates are performing terribly well in terms of fundraising. Now, it's just for the primaries, so it's not really, it's sort of like the exhibition series right now before you get to the real games.
Is the thinking that once a nominee is selected, more national money will come in for that nominee?
National, state, local, it will come in. But as far as, which of these 3 candidates, I don't think the 3 candidates have given it a real sense of urgency as to why they should individually be the choice. It looks to me like when you look at these reports, 2 of them are spending quite heavily on kind of overhead, consultants, office software, things that don't really relate to votes. The one that seems to be spending money on real advertising is Buddy Carter.
And Fred, let's bring in a Democrat's perspective here, because Mark, rightly, you're looking at the GOP primary. You've got Derek Dooley, Buddy Carter, and Mike Collins duking it out on that side of the aisle.
Yeah.
The winner of that race will go on to face incumbent Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff. Fred, your thoughts on the fundraising totals that he has announced so far?
I mean, his totals are absolutely phenomenal.
I think it's something in the neighborhood of $25 million cash on hand going into this year.
Exactly, with another 10, 12 million raised in the last quarter. So he has been a fundraising machine, and I think that indicates just how important, or a recognition of how important this seat is. Even though Republicans have a 3-seat majority in the Senate, so many decisions, including the recent War Powers decision, came down to 1 vote. So J.D. Vance has had to break that vote. So I think Democrats, and normally you would think, we're in the minority party, but every vote really counts in the era of Trump. And I think that's reflected in the fundraising for Senator Ossoff.
Chauncey, when you're reporting out your work, when you're talking to voters, what do they say is most important to them? Because that's kind of what all of these campaigns ultimately are trying to distill. How can they most connect with their potential voters?
Well, it's become cliche at this point, but affordability has definitely been the name of the game for most voters. We've seen a lot of folks who have a little bit of frustration with the Trump administration on issues like Greenland and Venezuela, and what appears to a lot of people not to be focused on the kitchen sink issues that the voters are concerned with some of the inflation numbers. There's been a Jon Ossoff has the power of incumbency, which is huge. He's also got a lot of name recognition, being in office for 5 years. There tends, without an official endorsement from Trump, there hasn't been a coalescing around one Republican candidate, and that's part of the reason I think that you don't see as much around there.
And that is a little bit of I don't want to say unique, because there are other races around the country where the president has not weighed in on the Republican side, but it is a little unusual. Mark, why do you think the president has not yet endorsed in this Republican Senate primary? He
really has 3 candidates that are pretty good from his point of view. You know, the one thing that Derek Dooley may not be able to bring to the table is he being, you know, Governor Kemp, of course, was instrumental in getting him into this race, or at least in supporting him from the outset.
He's been a vocal backer of
That might
Dooley.
be a negative with Trump in the background here, because they have really pushed hard to try to get a Trump endorsement. Buddy Carter has been a junior member of House leadership, but has been enormously supportive of President Trump. But he comes from a part of the state that doesn't have a whole lot of the vote. He comes from the Savannah area, and it's just a small portion of the state's vote. But if you look at the numbers overall for the campaign contributions, Jon Ossoff raised $9.9 million in this quarter. The combined number of all the candidates wasn't even half that. So it's big. It's a big difference.
As you said that, a little wry smile spread across Fred's face there. That, I'm sure, is something that Democrats are happy to hear.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and again, when we talk about defending the Senate, that's one thing there. But when we think about the November election holistically, a strong Senator Ossoff and resources around that race really, we believe, will, not to use your Republican term, but trickle down and affect and impact the rest of the elections, the governor's race and the other seats. So this is a really exciting time. But what that really does, Chauncey and Zach, is that it allows Senator Ossoff to frame the election rather than being defined by the Republicans who are busy fighting with each other.
Chauncey, last word to you, 15 seconds here. We're talking about money, we're talking about endorsements. How much of it do you think really impacts a voter's choice?
In terms of campaign finance, I think the main issue here is being able to, do advertising and things that are going to get your name recognition, especially if, even though they've been in office as a U.S. congressman for a while, Collins, Carter, and Dooley, who's a football coach, they don't have as much, they're not in the spotlight as much as Ossoff has been for the last several years.
We're getting the wrap here, guys. We're low on time. Thank you very much. More of the Georgia Vote and our political roundtable right back after this. Charlie Bailey, the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party, argues last year's 2 victories in the Public Service Commission elections showed the party's efforts are working. Faith Jesse sat down with Bailey this week. Their conversation begins with the new legislative session.
How can some of those Democrat proposals come out on top with a Republican majority?
Well, if the Republicans change their mind. I mean, there is a math problem here. I mean, if the Republicans, right now, they are in control of both houses in our General Assembly, the House and the Senate, though, to your point, margins are narrowing. But for the time being, nothing gets made law but for Republicans, see the light and decide to vote that way. And that's always an option to them. It is an option right now to expand Medicaid in the face of what Republicans in D.C. have done.
Would that be a top Democrat priority this year?
Yeah, and I think it has been, for years now. And we are, we send our tax dollars, like the people in this state, hardworking people in the state, send their tax dollars all over the country to our brothers and sisters in Kentucky and Indiana and California and New York for them to have health care. But the Republicans in this state have refused to use our own tax dollars to provide health care for our folks, for working people. And on top of that, the indignity of cutting $540 million out of our rural health care system, which this big billionaire bill did, that Mike Collins and Buddy Carter voted for and Derek Dooley supported, and cut these ACA subsidies. So now that we've got 1.4 million Georgians that are already seeing their premiums double, triple, and quadruple, the decisions the Republicans have made over the last decade to not use our own tax dollars to help our own people have been compounded by the decisions the Republicans have made in D.C. just last year. But they can do something about it. They're not potted plants. They can do something, and they could pass Medicaid expansion in this month.
We have a primary coming up in a very crowded gubernatorial race on the Democratic side. You all are not taking sides until after that primary. That makes sense. But I want to ask you, because I spoke with Jeff Duncan last week, and he says that he is the top candidate to win statewide. Some people agree. Some people don't. Others believe Keisha Lance Bottoms would have a good chance, but others say she wouldn't do well statewide. Do you believe Jeff Duncan would have a really good chance of beating a Republican?
I think any of our candidates that are running, and you're right, we got a bunch of wonderful. I don't think you said wonderful. You said we got a bunch of candidates. I'll say
crowded field.
A crowded field. I'll say we have a crowded field of really good candidates that all have their theories of the case about why they're the best candidate and their policies are best. And you're of course exactly right. I'm Switzerland there. I don't get involved. We're going to support our nominee and make sure they get elected. So I think any of them.
But if somebody's at home, they look at the policies, they say, I'm a Democrat, or I'm leaning towards the Democrats, and I love all their policies, but I want to put somebody there that's going to be Republicans. And they want some, insight. What would you tell them?
I'd say that that's part of the same evaluation, right? That voters are going to make, and that they always do. A primary, you always have, as you described, okay, who aligns with my policies I prefer, or my politics. But a part of it is, who can win? I mean, that's ultimately, you do have to win. So, but the voters will make that judgment of who they think of these great candidates, who they think is best positioned to win in November. And I'm not going to substitute my judgment for that of the voters.
We should note we also invited the leader of the Georgia GOP to an interview on this week's The Georgia Vote, but they did not agree to a time for the interview. If you want to watch Faith's full interview with Charlie Bailey right now, it is streaming on 11 Alive Plus. So let's go back now to our political roundtable. Mark, let's start with you. We just saw Charlie Bailey there making a pretty positive case in his view for how Republicans or Democrats rather, are headed into 2026. What's the Republican position headed into this new midterm election year?
Well, Republicans in the House have talked a lot about property tax relief in a significant way, or even potentially a plan to eliminate property taxes for homeowners. The Senate has talked about probably more so eliminating the income tax, which is one of the things that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is running on, of course. Both of them are popular with the voters. The one that probably gets the most anger from voters is probably property taxes. That's really where a lot of passion comes from. People really dislike writing that $500, $1,000, $2,000 check every month to cover property taxes.
I mean, ties into, Chauncey, what you were telling us earlier, this idea of affordability. Chauncey, how is a candidate going to stand out on that issue, Republican or Democrat, if everybody is trying to talk about affordability right now?
Well, that's one of the cruxes. For Republicans, property taxes is definitely a strong suit. I know that the Lieutenant Governor and Governor Kemp have kind of differed as to the gradual phasing out of the state income tax, but property taxes is something that, even among Democrats, you'll see support for freezing and homestead exemptions and things of that nature. But in addition to that, talking about larger economic policy, a lot of what's happening here politically is going to depend on what happens nationally with the cost of living, the PSC elections was one signal. Folks were just tired of the rate hikes for Georgia Power customers and the like. So that's, it's going to be an open question how that plays out.
Mark, you pointed out there's this early kind of dividing line a little bit over whether the big focus in the legislature is on scaling back property taxes or income taxes. One way or another, many are talking about scaling back some kind of taxes. Yeah. Fred, are those going to be proposals that Democrats get behind?
I think it depends on the particular proposal. Democrats are not in favor of eliminating the income tax because we know that it has to be replaced with something, right, in order to have the revenues. And so it's a little bit of a campaign fool's goal that Burt Jones is throwing out. But it depends on it. The big thing, I think, for Democrats as a party is we have to remind voters that this affordability is a Republican issue. Thank you to the Republicans in 24 for setting the stage, setting the table. Now we need to make sure that they eat it in 2026.
And then you have to look back at affordability was an issue even more so back in 2022 and 23 and 24. We just weren't using that term. It's sort of a new term that we're using. One argued here a little while ago it was kind of a buzzword, but you had inflation going from 9% under Biden down to 2.4% in the last quarter.
Oh, 3% when Biden left office.
You had Okay. You had gas prices plummet from $3.50 down to $2.50. Mortgage rates are coming down. So I think that the affordability issue, yes, it is an issue, but this didn't just start in the last year. This has been something that's been talked about for a while.
Well, I don't know. Healthcare is a pretty big driver, and that is a big issue that's kicked in.
It is, and who caused the increases? It was Democrats under the Obamacare vote.
Really? Well, I think it was Republicans who refused to do anything.
Our own, I don't know about you, but our own premium used to be $700 a month. If my family went and got it on the private market today, it'd be $3,000. I think it's unaffordable.
And we're going to have to cap it there. Guys, this is a good microcosm of the conversation we are going to play out all up until the primary and then all the way to November. We're done with the panel now. We'll be right back with more of the Georgia Vote next. Welcome back. The attorney for State Representative Sharon Henderson is responding after Governor Brian Kemp suspended her from the legislature. It all follows an indictment for alleged unemployment fraud. Henderson is a Democratic State House member from Covington. Federal authorities arrested her last month, accusing her of stealing nearly $18,000 in unemployment benefits during the pandemic. According to the governor's executive order suspending her, a state review commission found her indictment interferes with her ability to serve and recommended the suspension. Her attorney is Gerald Griggs, who also serves as president of the Georgia NAACP. He sent 11 Alive News a statement saying in part, quote, "We fully expect that all proceedings, both criminal and any related political or legislative actions, will afford my client the full measure of due process," adding that we look forward to litigating this case in a courtroom. Stay with us. We'll return with this week's Voice of the Voter right after this. We say it every week, and we will continue to say it all the way through 2026. You can't have the Georgia Vote without Georgia voters. This week's Voice of the Voter is Kishana Holland.
Hi, I'm Kishana Holland, and I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, currently residing in the city of East Point. I am a political strategist and a voter advocate. I am currently the communications director for a community-based voter advocacy organization. For me, one of the most pressing issues in Georgia, finding qualified elected officials to actually run for the seats. Right now in Georgia, we have a lot of individuals with no civic engagement, no community engagement, or passion for the communities that they claim to serve. What concerns me in my daily life, healthcare access. Here on the South Side, we don't have a hospital. I have seniors in the middle of the night, if they have an emergency, they have to pray that they make it to Grady. So I need my elected officials to understand that. I need them to listen. I need them to be active and present in the community outside of election season. You know, I'm really optimistic that we will see a change in the midterm elections, but I'm also hopeful that our elected officials will understand that they serve the people.
Our thanks to Kishana and everybody who shared their views with us as we start this big midterm election year. We appreciate you for watching us today as well, and we hope to see you here back again next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.